So we are back with the second half of Naoki Hamaguchi's interview with Automaton, and boy is this one juicier. He's talking everything from his interview with Maximilian Dood, molding the ending of Revelation, and even DLC possibilities after the 7 remake series has wrapped up. So that's what we'll discuss in today's video. So if any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button. And if you're new here and you'd like to stick around, you can subscribe. It is always appreciated. Alright, so again, this interview comes to us from Automaton Media via Automaton West. I'll leave links in the description down below if you would like to read the full article for yourself. And we start off with that interview that Hamaguchi did with Maximilian Dood in his home the day that Revelation was revealed, which was pretty shocking. So how did that come to be? Hamaguchi says he is a fan of FF7 and he's attended all of the media and influencer hands-on events for Remake and Rebirth so far, which is how we got to connect. When he saw the announcement, he immediately reached out to me, and that's how the opportunity for the interview came about. He continues by saying thanks to him, it ended up becoming a hot topic in North America. They were like, it's so funny witnessing Hamaguchi in Maximilian Dood's room, the same room we see every time we watch his videos. I'm really amazed by how much influence he has. The interviewer then says that's a pretty big opportunity. There must have been other streamers who were a bit jealous of that role. Hamaguchi responds by saying, we have no plans to exclusively work with just one influencer and call them our only official partner influencer. I'm sure that the influencer wouldn't want that either. Rather, I'd be personally very happy to maintain good relationships with many different people over the long term. So if the chance arises, we might collaborate with those streamers in the future. And that was such a cool moment. I was busy doing my own stuff, and once things kind of settled down and I started editing, I threw on Max's stream, and next thing I know, he's like, chat, Hamaguchi is coming to my house. I'm gonna interview him, which was insane. Again, it's a surreal image of seeing Hamaguchi with his interpreter in Max's room, just chatting it up about Revelation. And I thought Max did a really great job interviewing Hamaguchi. Interviewing someone is not easy. Coming up with the proper questions and the appropriate ways to ask them is very difficult. And you're also working with not necessarily NDAs, but there are obviously things that Hamaguchi cannot say or answer, and there are certain things that Max just wouldn't be able to ask. But I thought it was a really fun interview, and again, very, very surreal. And to see Max get that opportunity is super cool. I've been a fan of his for a very long time now, and to what Hamaguchi said about like the influencer not wanting that like official role, that is 100% Max. Max is a very influential person. He has a massive platform, and I think within the community of the FF7 remake series, for the people that like it, we kind of view him as a bit of a North Star when it comes to this series, because he's so passionate. He's such a big fan about 7. He's so knowledgeable that anytime he sits down to talk about it, people are going to listen and have fun, and just to hear his theories get thrown out, what he's been through, what the series means to him is really, really cool. But also, having watched Max for a long time, he's also the type of streamer that, like Hamaguchi says, wouldn't want that type of official role, right? Max wouldn't want to be the conduit between Square Enix and Final Fantasy fans. He's just a fan himself, and because of his platform, he's able to really champion the stuff that he likes and believes in, whether it is Final Fantasy VII or something like Killer Instinct or Marvel vs. Capcom, and helping that franchise come back, specifically with 2, which was in jail for the longest time. So to see that interview happen was super dope. Max deserved it so much. And again, it was just such a surreal image of just seeing Hamaguchi sitting in Max's room with all of his stuff behind him, getting to just chat Final Fantasy. That's pretty cool. Up next, Hamaguchi touches on a topic that went viral a few months back, primarily because people took his words out of context, but he was talking about the relationship between streaming on Twitch and, playthroughs on YouTube, and people watching these playthroughs en masse, and how it creates a little bit of a crisis for him and developers when they develop their own games. And people took that and twisted what Hamaguchi was saying, and their interpretation was, oh, he's blaming streamers. He's blaming fans for when their games fail and suck. And it's like, that's not what he was saying at all. Essentially, what Hamaguchi was saying is that watching how popular streamers and content creators get with their playthroughs puts the onus on them as developers to be better with their games, to really make sure that what you're playing, what you're paying for, you're getting your bang for your buck, essentially. So that onus falls on them to make something that is so great that it takes someone from being a passive viewer on a Twitch or a YouTube and go, oh, I kind of want to play this for myself because I think I would have done this thing differently, or I would have had the character do this thing in this conversation. So that's essentially what Hamaguchi was saying. He even responds in the interview by saying, yeah, things got heated, to which he laughs, but he elaborates a little bit more on those specific thoughts by saying, even when it comes to RPGs, simply trying to copy-paste conventions isn't enough. That's why I felt that as creators, we must keep on taking new challenges to preserve our fan base and ensure that RPGs will keep being a genre that's supported for the next 20 to 30 years, and even well beyond that. He continues by saying, that's right. As creators, we need to embrace that sense of crisis, take responsibility for what we do, and create our works with care. Revelation is not a definite answer to all those issues, nor are we fully satisfied with it yet. However, looking at Revelation as a single experience, we've incorporated a lot of side content where elements ranging from the narrative to strategies will change based on players' choices. Even if they're watching a live stream, we wanted to attempt things that would make players think, oh, if it was me, I'd like to do that differently. That's the kind of sentiment I was trying to convey. So I thought he was pretty clear there. Hopefully things don't get twisted any further. But again, the onus is the word I like to use. It's a fun word, which is essentially like saying that they're putting the pressure on themselves to create something that is so good that you want to be an active participant, which I think is cool. That's what I think a lot of developers should and probably do strive for, whether you're making video games or you're making movies or YouTube videos or you write poetry, whatever it is that you do, you want to try and be better at what you're doing. Now, you might have noticed that Hamaguchi in that answer mentioned things like narrative choices and different strategies. Well, yeah, Revelation's going to have a little bit more in terms of the narrative stuff with player choices and branching outcomes. So he's going to speak more on that. He says, to begin with, the concept of Revelation is that it's the final installment in the trilogy. So we wanted each of the characters to have their own beliefs, resolve, and feelings as they head towards the story's conclusion. On top of that, we felt it would be better if that emotional journey were different for each player. Kind of like, I want my Vincent to take on this challenge with this kind of mindset, or I want my Cloud to take on this challenge with that kind of mindset. We want each player to experience those feelings in their own way. Being a game with so many famous iconic characters, each of whom players have different levels of emotional attachment to, it felt that homogenizing players' feelings towards the characters wouldn't make for compelling gaming experience. So we aimed for a game design where players' choices within the game would effectively align with those feelings. That to me is so incredibly cool and very interesting because I imagine it's very difficult to take these characters and still keep them as who they are, what we know them to be as fans, but also allow enough wiggle room in these branching dialogue paths and maybe things that happen in certain cutscenes to allow the player to kind of mold them or push them into a certain direction while still maintaining their character identity. Sounds very complicated, but I'm sure it's probably really cool. And Hamaguchi has even mentioned in the past that you might have to make decisions under immense pressure in this game. So I imagine a weapon is attacking a village and you as Tifa probably have to decide what to do next. So that is really cool. And I imagine that the side content as well is how we will help shape and mold these characters. So the relationship dynamics in Rebirth was Cloud getting to know each party member on his own. So it was about the relationship between Cloud and Tifa, Cloud and Barret, Cloud and Red. But now there is an emphasis on those characters, their backstory, and their lore. So I imagine there will be quite a lot of side content that dives deeper into those characters, and the more you dive into that side content and complete it, the more fleshed out those characters will become and kind of be pushed into that direction that you as the player kind of envision for them. So there's a lot of systems here working together. Sounds pretty complex. And it makes, I think, the connection with the player and the characters that much deeper because it's like, oh, my Cloud is going to be different from Maximilian Dood's Cloud. My Vincent is going to be different from his version of Vincent. And I feel like we will take that journey. Oh my God, I'm getting excited. And I'm getting a little emotional. We're taking the journey to the end of this remake series with these characters, but we get to have a bit of a say in how they approach things and what their mindset is. That to me is so cool. And I cannot wait to see how it plays out in practice. It could fall apart and be very inconsequential, or it could be something that's done in a way where it's like, wow, that is my Cloud, that's my Tifa. We're gonna get married and we're gonna have a very lovely life, you know? So that's pretty cool. I'm excited. And again, I think that kind of helps with what Hamaguchi was saying before, making a system in a game or a game itself that is just so compelling that you want to play it. I'm no longer a passive participant. I'm going to become an active one. Very cool. Now, what about the ending to this trilogy? Now, don't worry, there's no spoilers here from Hamaguchi in regards to what's going to happen. But he's mentioned in the past that he wants players to feel like the ending, going through that whole series, was worth it. So he elaborates more by saying, I've been giving the same answer each time I'm asked about the ending. But since people only focus on the things they want to hear, the actual truth rarely gets across. He laughs. I imagine there's some frustration there too, because again, whether it's like mistranslations, people twisting his words, or only paying attention and cherry picking certain things, it's got to be frustrating. But he says, to clarify, once again, I have never told any media outlet about what kind of ending Revelation will have. It's been 30 years since the original Final Fantasy VII and 10 years since we began developing the remake series. Many fans have stuck with us for a really long time, and we've got enormous support from the development team as well. Amidst all that, I've walked alongside the 7 remake franchise, and I'm doing my best to deliver a game that will make people glad they were involved with it. And while I said that I'm confident we'll be able to achieve that, I've never actually revealed how the ending will turn out. To which the interviewer says, so you're choosing to stay silent about the ending? Hamaguchi responds by saying, it's more that I don't want people to focus just on the ending. I'm aiming to create a game that will make people feel, I'm glad they made the remake series, or I'm glad I was able to see the remake series through to the end when they look back on the whole trilogy. The ending might be fully faithful to the original, or it might end up being something completely different, or perhaps it might go in a direction no one could have imagined in the first place. I'd like everyone to experience it for themselves. Now, before we analyze and give discussions, the next question I feel kind of bleeds into that one, and it has to do with Advent Children and its connections and potentially the ending of the game. Because the devs have talked about potentially leading into Advent Children or incorporating Advent Children, or the phrase was link up to Advent Children, it got kind of messy. So what does Hamaguchi say? I remember producer Katase and I said something along those lines in an interview way back, but since that interview was translated, there is a possibility that the exact nuance didn't get across. On the other hand, as the developers, we aren't denying the possibility of the AC ending, Advent Children. The concept of the 7 remake series is that we're creating a new overarching universe that encompasses the lore of the many various spin-offs we've created so far, not just AC, but also Dirge of Cerberus and Crisis Core. So we're not denying the possibility of the ending tying into Advent Children, but rather we're saying that Advent Children has just been incorporated into the overarching 7 remake series, including the ending. However, I won't comment on whether the ending is positioned to lead into it. The interviewer then says, oh, so you're creating a broader framework of the overarching universe, to which Hamaguchi says, yes, the correct nuance is that we're not denying the canonicity of the endings of any of the titles in the 7 universe, and that they've all been incorporated into the remake series as we explore what kind of conclusion the new series itself will reach. So it wouldn't be quite accurate to say that the development team explicitly stated that the 7 remake series conclusion is connected to 7AC. So obviously there's a lot going on there, and there's been a lot of different discussions over the years. And again, the big thing to point out here is a lot of these interviews are translated from Japanese to English or Japanese to Chinese or Italian, what have you. So some of the nuance does get lost in the language, but I think what essentially Hamaguchi here is saying, stemming from like the ending of the game, is that I think oftentimes as fans, myself included, we tend to put the cart before the horse, and we get so excited, reasonably so, about the game's ending of like, where is this story going? How do they conclude it? How does everything get wrapped up in a way that feels satisfying? So naturally we start to talk about the ending of the original, the ending of Advent Children or Dirge, and how it could potentially have an effect on this game's ending. And I think the whole point, like Hamaguchi's been saying for a very long time, and as well as Katase and Nomura, is that the goal of the remake series was to take all things FF7 and put them into their own universe in a way where it makes sense and is organic. So I think that is how the ending, in my personal opinion, will shape out. It'll have influences from everything, from the original 7's ending to Advent Children's ending to maybe even elements of Dirge's ending. I think will all be there to a degree, but it'll sort of probably be something new. And they've been incorporating a lot of that stuff into the main journey. And speaking of journey, again, putting the cart before the horse, I think it's important to kind of emphasize what Hamaguchi says there about wanting people to enjoy that experience, it's not just focusing on the ending. I think sometimes we'll lose sight of the fact that we had this incredible journey getting to the end of the remake series, regardless of how it turns out, regardless of if you love it or you hate it or you're indifferent. We can't forget that the journey getting there was phenomenal. From, the troubles at the beginning of 2015, where we saw a version of 7 Remake that would disappear, and then it wasn't until 2019 when it would have its proper reveal, and then Remake would come out and we would experience that, and then the lead up to Rebirth, and then playing Rebirth, and now the lead up from Rebirth to Revelation coming out. That journey, playing through those games, is what's important. So regardless of how the ending is, I already know that when everything is said and done, I will have appreciated this 7 Remake series and enjoyed my journey and experience with it. And as Hamaguchi says, I'll be glad that I was able to see this entire series through to the very end. And that's what's so exciting about Revelation and the ending, is that it's an unknown journey. And we're all going to get to experience it together, especially since the game is now going to be multi-platform. Finally, everyone can take that journey together. Now, the next question has to do with DLC, and the interviewer does apologize to Hamaguchi by saying that they don't mean to ask a mean question, but they're kind of wondering if the main game could end on a cliffhanger that would then warrant a DLC to help wrap things up. So what does Hamaguchi think there? He says, the story will be concluded within the main game. We're serious about concluding the series with Revelation, and we're proceeding with development with that goal in mind. If we were to hypothetically release any DLC, we would likely want to create a kind of spin-off focused on a specific character that depicts their untold stories, kind of like what we did with Yuffie with episode Intermission, and I think there is demand for it among fans. So in case we do end up considering making a DLC, this is the kind of thing that we'll likely attempt to do. Which, before I give my thoughts, bleeds into the next question, because it has to do with Ever Crisis, with that shutting down. Potentially, some fans are worried that maybe Revelation will truly be the end of FF7. What does Hamaguchi have to say? Right now, we're focused on finishing the development of Revelation, but we haven't thought about what will happen after. However, once the game is out, we'll be observing everyone's reactions and reviews. So if there is a significant demand, and if we, as creators, are able to come up with a fresh and compelling answer to that, we might consider doing something else down the line. On the other hand, thinking too far ahead is definitely not a good thing for Revelation, so we're solely focused on finishing up its development for the time being. I believe that Revelation will shape up to be a better game if we don't let ourselves think about other stuff. So after the series comes to its conclusion, I hope that both we, the creators, and the fans can move towards the future together while thinking about what comes next. So good on them, they're focusing solely on Revelation, polishing, making sure it's the best that it can possibly be. Then once the game comes out, still focusing on it. Again, you don't want to put the cart before the horse and start going, oh, we're going to do this DLC and that DLC and maybe do this. You kind of lose sight of the, actual purpose of what you're doing is that goal. But with Hamaguchi saying if they were to do a type of DLC, it would be like Yuffie's DLC, focusing on one specific character, their story and journey, and with Ever Crisis shutting down and Ever Crisis having the first soldier story, to me, the best candidate for this type of DLC is Sephiroth, whether it's a DLC or a full mainline game. The story of Sephiroth and the first soldier, all the way up until the Nibelheim incident, is so fascinating and compelling and genuinely well written and well done. And I think that there is so much there that you can mine for a DLC or a full-on proper spin-off, because they do get a lot conveyed within that story, but there are some things that do get kind of glossed over or mentioned in passing that I think that if you took the approach of the 7 Remake series to storytelling and world building and combat mechanics, you could take the first soldier storyline and flesh that out so much more, from Sephiroth's birth to him growing up and training to become a soldier, the relationship that he has with Glenn, Matt, and Lucia, and how strong that bond was and how big of an influence they had on him, to him meeting young Angeal and butting heads with him, to eventually solidifying their brotherhood together, to Sephiroth becoming that war hero in Wutai. You would probably have to sneak some Genesis in there at some point. And then you could literally end that DLC with Sephiroth and Zack heading to Nibelheim. And you could do like a little teaser at the end that says the story continues in Final Fantasy VII Remake, So Sephiroth is the perfect candidate for me, especially since they've actually did a lot to flesh him out as a character in terms of combat. We only get to use him a little bit in Rebirth in the main story, and I do believe he is unlockable in the VR challenges. But even then, like, he's got a full-on move set. He's got attacks that have like follow-ups that you have to time properly. Like if you do like a Zanshin, you'll see like a quick opportunity to do like a powered up version of Zanshin by pressing triangle. He's got like delay combos and really cool abilities, and he's just so much fun to utilize in combat that it would be nice to see them take all of that stuff and put it in a game where we could utilize it way more. With young Sephiroth all the way until, you know, he's older and eventually, you know, becomes that war hero. So I think that would be prime DLC opportunity. And again, you can take that first soldier story and flesh it out even more. Let the characters take a little bit more time to get to know one another, let things breathe, expand on the big, you know, set pieces. That is what I would love to see. Another option, Vincent. Depending on how Vincent is handled in Revelation, they might deep dive into his backstory. They may not. If they don't, he would be a perfect candidate to show how he was when he became a Turk. What happened to him to transform him into the Vincent that he is today, to locking himself into, you know, the mansion of Nibelheim. So there's a lot they could do. But I would personally really love to see Sephiroth. I know some people would love Advent Children, but again, it depends on how Revelation plays out. We might have playable Advent Children stuff in that game already. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. So what about the future? Revelation was revealed 2 months ago. What's coming up for Hamaguchi and Revelation? He says, "We'll be steadily unveiling new information, targeting a specific time frame. We're also preparing a way for players and the media to try out the game at various events." I think you can probably imagine which events I'm talking about. So expect a bunch of new information from us there. And from that point on, we'll be unveiling new info pretty much without stopping. So please look forward to that. So looking at upcoming events, there's Gamescom at the end of August, although I don't think Square Enix is confirmed to be there, if I remember correctly. I think Gamescom did put out their list of companies, and I don't recall seeing Square there, but please feel free to correct me in the comments. We do have Tokyo Game Show. I think PAX West is coming up, and then there's the Game Awards. Although the Game Awards isn't like Summer Game Fest where they have playable builds for games or like backroom appointments. So that pretty much leaves TGS then, right? TGS and maybe PAX. It's looking like that game's already playable. Again, they're in the polishing stage, so I would not be shocked if they tell people at TGS, yeah, there's a playable demo of Revelation on the show floor. Go ahead and check it out. Again, I do think that at Tokyo Game Show, there probably will be some sort of stage show with Hamaguchi and some of the developers where they showcase some of the elements of the game in real time, which I think could be super cool. So they're ready, dude. Once this marketing train starts, it ain't stopping. So I would expect, again, Tokyo Game Show, new trailer, some sort of showcase, playable demo maybe there at the show, and then maybe at the end of the year, maybe early next year. Well, I don't know. I'm trying to think of when they could release a demo for the public online. So that'll depend on release date. So they could shock us and give us the release date at Tokyo Game Show or the Game Awards, but at some point after that, you know, next year, I assume we'll get a public demo that we can play for all of us normies, which should be very exciting to look forward to. And I'll be covering anything that Revelation does at Tokyo Game Show this year. Again, I'm getting really excited. I always enjoy checking out Tokyo Game Show. There's just something about waking up in the morning and looking at the info of what happened and watching shows in Japanese that I don't understand the language, but I'm like, this looks cool. So that'll be something to look forward to. And with that being said, that is the video. Again, I very much enjoy Automaton's coverage whenever they get to speak to Hamaguchi. Even when they're not talking to him, they're speaking to other developers. They always put up some really great write-ups. They ask some great questions. And it's really cool to see Hamaguchi get candid, put his foot down, and really, you know, go out of his way to explain what he means when he says certain things. It's very refreshing, and I'm very excited to see what he and his team do moving forward at Square Enix and what they're able to do next. So with that being said, let me know what you guys thought in the comments down below of what we discussed in today's video. The question I'll leave you guys with is, who would you like to see get a DLC after Revelation? Sephiroth, Vincent, maybe Genova, if they're willing to go that far. Let me know in the comments down below. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.